Welcome, everybody, to Dinging Corners, a baseball podcast and video powered by SlabStox. I'm your host, Nate, and today we are going to be covering the 2020 MLB season, specifically an MLB season preview. As many of you know, the MLB and the MLB Players Association have finally come to an agreement on a season starting, and that will be July 24th for most teams, July 23rd for the Yankees and Nationals and Giants and Dodgers. They play on ESPN on July 23rd. Most other teams start July 24th. My Brewers play the Cubs on ESPN on July 24th, so very excited about that. Nice to have a nationally televised game for the first game of the year. As many of you will also know, it's a 60-game season. A number of oddities that I've come up with because of that. And so we will cover the season itself, the new rules, the roster, different rosters that get involved here. And then we're going to be covering some oddities that I found. And then I'm going to be making predictions, not necessarily World Series predictions, and I'll get into why there when we get down there. And then just end it off with a few things I noticed that are a couple of problems with the 60-game season. So I hope you all enjoy this podcast. And if you're listening to this and you're like, man, I really want to look into some of those guys that he talks about because I will be talking about specific guys in my predictions, you're in luck. At some point this summer, SlabStox will be coming out with our own platform for being able to look up card prices and buy and sell through the app powered by eBay. And so if there's any guys in here, they will be in the app. You will be able to look them up and be able to see their price trends from there. So keep that in mind and get excited about that. And hopefully you're excited about this podcast. So let's jump right into it. So like I said earlier, it's a 60-game season. There's going to be 40 games against division opponents and 20 games against corresponding division opponents. So if you're the NL Central, you'll be playing 40 games against the Brewers will be playing 40 games against the Pirates, the Reds, the Cubs, and the Cardinals, and then 20 games against the Twins, the White Sox, Royals, and Tigers, and Indians. Now, it's going to be a little weird, so there's at least 30 home games, 30 home games, 20 in division, and then another 10 interleague. You'll be playing 5 times at home against each opponent, and then interleague, I think it's a little bit weirder. I think we might be playing the White Sox and the Twins more than we play the Royals and the Tigers and Indians. I could be wrong on that though. So there's some oddities there, but that's the basic layout of the season. Now there's different rosters for this year. Instead of having your full complement of players and your full complement of players to trade from, now there's only a 60-man roster. So you get to choose 60 guys to have throughout the season on a 60-man roster. They're not all going to play, and they don't need to all be on your 40-man roster to be able to play. So you can only call up guys to the majors if they're on your 40-man roster. Well, this year there's a 60-man roster, and these players are all walks of the minor leagues. I mean, the Rays have Wander Franco on their 60-man roster. I don't think he gets called up this year, but he's on there, probably just in case they want to trade him, because you can't trade anybody from outside of that. And the trade deadline, while we're at it, is August 31st. Much different this year, so you can get about a month in, and then teams can have their trade deadline, maybe add a guy for the 30-game stretch run or so. The rosters themselves are a little strange. So for the first 15 days of the season, it's a 30-man roster. So you get 30 guys. Last year is 25-man roster, right? And then the rules changed those and so 25-man roster and September call-ups. You could have as many as you wanted all the way up to your 40-man roster. That changed this year. It was going to be 26-man rosters, and then you could call up 2 guys in September. So September call-ups, and you could have 28-man rosters in September. So you get an extra guy throughout the year, but you give up the ability to have a million guys at the end of the year, which is not a big deal for some teams, but a pretty big deal for like my Brewers, who routinely use a ton of pitchers in September just so they can keep throwing out fresh arms. And it works really well for them, and it's worked well for them the last 2 years. Well, that's no longer an option. So 30-man roster for the first 15 days, and then it goes to a 28-man roster from there. and that lasts for the next 14 days. So by day 29 of the season, it goes down to the normal 26-man roster. And the 26-man roster is important because this September, there is no September call-ups, so we don't get to go up to 28 guys. It's 26 guys from then, from that point on, the 29th day of the season to the end of the season and into the playoffs. So a weird format this year. I'm not 100% sure why they're doing the expanded 30-man and 28-man rosters in the early going, probably just to try to keep guys healthy, keep the innings off arms. But I can't confirm that. But it's a weird layout, a couple things that we have to get used to in this season. And then new rules, onto new rules here. The big first rule is NLDH. So the DH, it's been talked about for a couple of years. Will they finally get a DH? That's really big for a couple of teams. The Brewers are one. Ryan Braun no longer has to play the outfield. He can stay a little bit more healthy and just DH. The same goes for the Reds, who signed Nick Castellanos to a 4-year, $60 million deal, something like that. 4 years, I believe. I don't remember the price on it. But they signed him to a big deal, and they were going to have him play the outfield. Well, he's a terrible, terrible defender. He takes away most of the value he adds with his bat. It gets taken away by his atrocious defense in left field. Well, that no longer has to happen. They can have him as a DH, which makes that deal an absolute steal. So, huge deal for the Reds, huge deal for the Brewers, a pretty big deal for most teams, really, not having to have your pitchers hit and getting an extra bat in there, and a really big deal for vets. The Nelson Cruz types, obviously Nelson Cruz is on the Twins and really good, but guys like that, veteran Edwin Encarnacion type guys, can now expand their careers by going to play for all 30 teams instead of just 15 select teams in the AL. So a big deal there. The next big rule is the 3-batter rule, which is already a rule going in place this season. Well, it's still a rule for the 60-game season, and that is a pitcher comes into the game, he has to face 3 batters. There's no other option. You can't bring a lefty reliever in to face a lefty and then take him out instantly. If he comes into the game, he has to face a minimum of 3 batters. The only thing I think that can top this is if a guy faces 3 batters and there's only like 1 or 2 outs left in the inning, and you send in another reliever and he gets 2 outs and 2 guys, or 1 out and 1 guy, and then it's the end of the inning, I don't think you have to put him back in there. I could be wrong on that. I don't have confirmation on that, but I'm pretty sure that if a guy comes in after the previous guy has gone 3 batters and doesn't have to face 3 batters till the end of the inning, then he will not have to come back out. So I think that's the only way you can get around it. So potentially that's how you could use your lefty-on-lefty relievers, by taking a lefty at the end of the inning, like if the Brewers use Alex Claudio against Joey Votto, for example. And then the big new one, so the NLDH was talked about but wasn't a thing. The 3-batter rule was a thing already and is still a thing. The really big new one is that in the minor leagues the last couple of years, teams have been starting a runner on second base in extra innings to try to speed up games so that you don't have these 16, 17 inning affairs that MLB teams generally have. Well, now that is happening in the MLB this year. Try to limit the number of innings, try to limit the number of wear and tear on bodies for 60 games, and so they are going to be starting runners on second base in extra innings. I don't love the rule. I do love a good extra inning game, but it's what it is. There's no going back on it, so we just have to accept it. As for the intricacies of it, I guess you could say, the player that will be on second base is the player that batted before the player who's up to start off the inning. If that's confusing, basically it's if the 5th hole hitter has to start the inning, the 10th inning, the 4th hole hitter will be the guy on second base, or you can choose a pinch runner. If back in the day it was the Brewers and you were supposed to have Prince Fielder on second, you're probably going to want to choose somebody like Nyjer Morgan to take his place. And so that's how that works. And then also ERA-wise, in case you're worried about your favorite reliever coming in and having a runner on second, and all of a sudden he gives up a run and he gets an extra run. That's not the case. They're going to consider it like they consider a error, a runner that gets on an error, and it's not going to go against your pitcher's ERA. So no problem there from a stat perspective for relief pitchers or starters if they manage to go 10 innings. All right, and then lastly, there's increased penalties for on-field altercations. So if a manager goes up and argues with an ump, instant ejection from what I read, and also increased fines and increased suspensions. Along with that, any players that also get into fights, increased fines, increased suspensions. They want to keep social distancing to a maximum, so there will be hopefully no on-field altercations at all through these 60 games. And if they do, if it does happen, they're trying to make it sure that it is not worth your while. So that is the new season, new rules, new roster changes in a nutshell. Let's move on to a couple oddities that I found here. Number one is travel miles. So something that most people probably don't think about is the amount of distance that teams have to travel throughout a year. And with a 60-game season in which you're playing just regional opponents, so NL Central is just playing NL Central and AL Central. NL East is just playing NL East and AL East. NL West is only playing NL West and AL West. There's a lot less miles being traveled, especially for the NL Central, where everyone is grouped in a grouping from Minnesota down to Missouri over to the very western edge of Pennsylvania. Extremely close grouping there. And so the miles traveled are really, really low. The Brewers travel the least amount of miles on the year with 3,962, and the Cubs travel the second least with 4,071. That's an extremely low amount of miles and a huge bonus come playoff time when you're playing other divisions. It's not a huge bonus during the season because everyone in the division is traveling the same amount of miles, basically. 8 of the bottom 10 teams in miles traveled are in the Central Divisions. Shout out to the Twins and Royals for being the only two that are not in the bottom 10, but they're pretty stinking close. And then Twins being the most traveled team in the AL Central, NL Central, not a huge disadvantage because they're a really good team, but you don't know how much the extra 2,000 miles I think they have to travel over and above the Brewers will affect them. And then on the flip side, the Rangers have to travel the most at 14,706 miles. So that's 11,000 more miles than the Brewers have to travel. And the Astros have to travel the second most at 13,954. And then the top 4 teams in miles traveled are from the AL West. The only team that's in the AL West that's not in the top 4 is the Angels. So hopefully they'll be able to keep Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani more healthy. It will be interesting to see what happens. Obviously, everyone in the AL West has to travel a ton. So they're all at the same disadvantage. Everyone in the NL Central and AL Central has to travel a little bit, not a ton. So they all have the same advantage. But when playoffs come around and the Rangers have, if they make it, have had to play 11,000 more or travel 11,000 more miles over the course of the season, that kind of wears you out. An underreported aspect of professional sports is the travel time and the wear and tear that takes on you. I know me, just traveling for vacation, traveling down to Florida or something, that's kind of taxing, and that's just a one-time thing, not every single day. So we'll see what happens there. And then there's a couple 60-game oddities here that I wanted to bring to your attention, and that is that last year the Nationals won the World Series, but through 60 games, they were 27-33. And then the Cubs were 34-26 through 60 games, tied with the Brewers for the division lead, and they missed the playoffs completely. So this year, we are going to have some surprisingly bad teams and some surprisingly good teams. I'm not going to predict who that is because it's probably just going to come out of nowhere. But there are going to be teams that just get off to a slow start, and all of a sudden you're like, holy smokes, the A's are supposed to be really good. But they got off to a slow start, and now they're just in too big of a hole for a 60-game season. They're already 7 games back. We are 3 weeks into the season, and they're done. Meanwhile, you might have like the Padres get out to a hot start, and all of a sudden they're right there with the Dodgers for the division lead because it's only a 60-game race. So we don't know what's going to happen. What we do know is that if every season was a 60-game season, the Nationals don't win the World Series last year. But the Cubs make the playoffs. So it's all different. It's all very weird. We're all going to have to get used to it together. So let's move on now to my prediction section. I'm going to be predicting 2 surprising teams, and then AL Cy Young, NL Cy Young, MVPs, Rookie of the Years. So let's get into it. No World Series predictions, like I said. Very odd season. Hard to explain who's going to be doing what. Sometimes a good team just gets off to a slow start, like the Nationals. The Nationals were supposed to be a really good team last year. They got off to a slow start, and then they ended up winning like 96 games. Or 92 games, something like that. So you just never know what's going to happen. But I am comfortable making a few lesser predictions, and so that's where we're going to go now. For my surprising teams, I have the AL surprise team will be the White Sox. Not that I expect them to be surprising in that I don't think they could have already been kind of good, but I think they'll probably make the playoffs this year, and I'll explain why. They're getting Carlos Rodon and Michael Kopech back and healthy again. 2 very solid starting pitchers, 2 young starting pitchers. Well, Rodon's not as young anymore, but still 2 solid pitchers to go along with Dallas Keuchel, Lucas Giolito, Dylan Cease, Gio Gonzalez, and then they even have Dane Dunning, who's a top prospect coming up in the wings. So they have a very nice rotation. If they can stay healthy for 60 games, it should be an asset to them. And then they are adding to their lineup Yasmani Grandal, who had a really good year for the Brewers last year. I was just looking at his wins above replacement numbers yesterday, and it was like 2.6 Baseball Reference WAR, but like 5 something for Fangraphs, depending on how you view catching metrics there. But anyway, you spin it, a really good starting catcher. They added Nomar Mazara, who's not spectacular, but a solid bat. And then Luis Robear, who is obviously one of the top prospects in all of baseball, an absolute stud, and going to be playing center field for them. And they add those guys to youngsters like Yohan Moncada and Eloy Jimenez and Zach Collins, and vets like Jose Abreu and Edwin Encarnacion and James McCann. And then on top of that, they have minor leaguers that could be close to ready, like Nick Madrigal, and Andrew Vaughn, who were, a couple of the best college bats when they got drafted in the top. Nick Madrigal was the 5th pick, and Andrew Vaughn was the 3rd pick in their respective years. And they are both really good. Andrew Vaughn was the best bat, even though he is a first base only, and they have Jose Abreu. And Nick Madrigal, while he doesn't have a ton of power, insanely good defender at second base, can move all around the infield, and his speed doesn't strike out, doesn't really walk. But 2 super nice players that could also get called up. I know Andrew Vaughn hasn't played above high A yet, but 60-game season, if you think he's your best bat, you call him up if you need to, if you're in a position to win. And then that is their roster. Division-wise, why I think the White Sox are going to be winning. Tigers and Royals are bad. Indians got significantly worse. They traded Kluber. They traded Bauer last year. Shane Bieber and Mike Clevenger are obviously really good, but there's huge question marks after that. Carlos Carrasco is going to be pitching, but he hasn't pitched in years. And then after that, the pitching gets way worse. And then the offense is iffy. Francisco Lindor is an MVP candidate, always an MVP candidate. Defensive is amazing. But after that, Jose Ramirez had a down year. He's trended in the wrong direction 2 years in a row. Obviously, 2 years ago, he was still really good. It was just a little bit worse of a year OPS-wise. And then last year was a much worse OPS-wise year for Jose Ramirez. And then Carlos Santana's good. But those are the only 2 guys that I feel really confident in to be solid players. After that, they have some interesting bats in Franmil Reyes and Domingo Santana. Yu Chang, who's a rookie shortstop this year and is in Top Series 2. He's probably the second best player in Top Series 2, so if you're looking to buy Top Series 2 2020, don't do it. Waste of money. Luis Robert is the only good player out of it. Christian Arroyo, Jake Bowers, and Bradley Zimmer, but you're going to need multiple of those guys to break out. and I just don't trust it happening. So the the pitching got worse, and they just don't have the trustworthy bats to carry the team, and they don't have the veteran bats to carry the team. A lot of these guys are not vets; they're just young kids that either broke out and have gone way south, or are just power bats like Franmil Reyes. And then, obviously, you have the Twins, the last team that I did not talk about in this division. And the Twins are really good, undoubtedly good. Their pitching got better. Their hitting is already really good. I just didn't want to pick them. So we're picking the White Sox. They're my surprise team. And then on the NL side, my surprise team is the Reds. The Reds are extremely, extremely good this year. They have drastically increased their pitching output with this offseason. They already had Luis Castillo and Sonny Gray and Anthony DeSclafani, but they traded for Trevor Bauer at last year's trade deadline, and they signed Wade Miley. That is legitimately probably the best rotation in the NL Central. No real doubt in my mind that that's the best rotation in the NL Central. So they got that going for them. They have a legit three-headed monster at the back end of their rotation, or their bullpen, in Amir Garrett, who was absolutely unbelievable last year and also took on the entire Pirates team by himself. Raciel Iglesias, who had a little bit of a down year, but is still a very, very good reliever. And then Michael Lorenzen, who is both extremely good and extremely jacked. And we also don't get to see him hit anymore, which is a pretty big disappointment because he is a pretty good hitter. But a very solid three-headed monster at the back end of the bullpen to go along with a pitching rotation that goes, 5-6 deep there. And then they added to their offense Mike Moustakas, Nick Castellanos, and Shogo Akiyama, if I'm saying that right. I don't know if I'm saying Shogo right, from Japan. They added those three guys, Moustakas as a second baseman, Castellanos now as a DH, and Akiyama as a left fielder, presumably, or a right fielder. They add that to Joey Votto, who's always great, Eugenio Suarez, who's always great, and then youngsters Aristides Aquino and Nick Senzel, and then even Freddie Galvis, who had a really good year last year and should be just a solid shortstop for them. That's a number of positions that are just pretty stinking good all the way around to go along with the best rotation in the NL Central and a bullpen that's really shaping up. So I'm expecting them to probably be the best team in the NL Central. I wouldn't be surprised, especially in 60 games. And on the other teams that got worse, the Pirates, they're already bad. They're the one legitimately bad team in the NL Central. And they lost Chris Archer for the season, which isn't a huge blow because he already wasn't very good, but they don't have a ton of depth. And then the Brewers, they lost Yasmani Grandal and Mike Moustakas from their lineup, and they lost Zach Davies and Jordan Lyles, and even they lost guys like Eric Thames, who is a solid bench platoon first base bat from their lineup. So a number of guys there, and they replaced him with a number of lesser guys. Eric Lauer, Luis Urias is in here, but he's been injured, and then he just came down with COVID-19, so we don't know what he's going to be doing. Justin Smoke to replace Eric Thames, and then a bunch of mid-tier utility guys, Brock Holt, Jed Jerko, those types of guys. So not a bunch of huge names to replace the big names they lost. So they got worse. And then the Cubs, and Omar Narvaez. They traded for Omar Narvaez. If you're going to replace Yasmani Grandal's bat at catcher, probably the best you can do is Omar Narvaez right now. But defensively, Yasmani is leaps and bounds better than him. So that's a big concern there. And then the Cubs, they spent no money this offseason. Almost quite literally no money this offseason. They signed Jeremy Jeffress and not much else. And then they already missed the playoffs last year, and all their players are getting older. John Lester's a year older, Jose Quintana's a year older, Jason Hayward's a year older. All these vets. You don't get better with age. You get worse, especially guys in John Lester's shoes that are much, much older. So big concern there for them. And then the Cardinals, they lost Marcell Ozuna. They didn't lose much else. A big bat out of their lineup. Otherwise, they're a really good team, but I refuse to pick the Cardinals. I just can't do it. If I'm not going to pick the Brewers, I'm definitely not going to pick the Cardinals. So it's the Reds there. But watch out for the Cardinals. They are really good. So my two surprise teams, the White Sox and the Reds, keep track of them. I think they will surprise some teams there. Now on to Cy Young Awards winners. Speaking of Cy Young, Luis Castillo of the Reds, or speaking of Cy Young, speaking of the Reds, Luis Castillo, who I brought up earlier, is my NL Cy Young Award winner. Right now, if you're looking at him, you can get, I just saw a Topps Chrome Gold rookie number to 50, sold for $48 the other day, so you can get into him really, really cheap. He was really, really good last year. He had a 3.40 ERA in 190 innings, and that was with 226 strikeouts in those 190 innings. So a really good kind of breakout year for Luis Castillo. He probably has the best changeup in baseball, and he routinely hits the high 90s with his fastball. And he's entering his prime. He's going to be, or he is 27 this year, and he's going to be 27 for the whole 60-game season. When guys start entering their prime, that's when they start figuring it out. I wouldn't be shocked if he exploded onto the scene here a little bit. I mean, he was already really good last year, but I wouldn't be shocked if he took another step forward and firmly cemented himself into Cy Young status here. The Reds are a solid offensive team also, with better pitching and fielding this year, and so they should have much more eyes on them, which should only help Luis Castillo's case. So Luis Castillo, $48 for a Topps Chrome Gold number to 50, and he is my NL Cy Young Award pick. And then on the AL Cy Young Award side, I wanted to go Mike Clevenger. I wrote an article about Mike Clevenger last year. I'm really excited about Mike Clevenger, but I didn't go Mike Clevenger. Instead, I went Frankie Montez of the A's to win the AL Cy Young. I love Frankie Montez. You can get his Bowman Chrome autos currently for around $5. If you're looking into that, he's super, super cheap. He had a 2.63 ERA in 96 innings with 103 strikeouts and only 23 walks last year before getting suspended by PEDs. The fear is that, the PEDs were what caused him to pitch really well, and that he'll come back and do poorly. Well, in the previous spring training, he'd gone 5.2 innings of scoreless baseball, and now he's come back in summer camp, and he is hitting triple digits with his fastball reportedly. He's got a nasty slider. He's always had a nasty slider, and now last year and going into this year still, he added a nasty, truly dominant splitter to his repertoire that has been able to allow him to both get lefties and righties out, which has caused him to go from a gifted but control and, platoon troubled pitcher into a very solid, very, very good starting pitcher who could be the ace of the A's this year. Would not shock me. And then the A's are a very good team. They have playoff expectations every single year, and I wouldn't be shocked if Frankie Montez, like I said, is the front man for that rotation and the one to lead them there. Moving on to Rookie of the Year candidates, we've got the AL Rookie of the Year, the NL Rookie of the Year. Gavin Lux is my pick to win NL Rookie of the Year. I have to pick him. This is a little bit boring. It's not really out there. It's not really exciting. I just have to pick him because he's from Wisconsin. Aaron and I are from Wisconsin. Gavin Lux is from Wisconsin. I'd be remiss if I did not pick Gavin Lux as NL Rookie of the Year. But also, a nice thing for him is that he has got a lot of eyes on him because the Dodgers are expected to be really good again, and that can only help his case. If you're looking to buy into Gavin Lux, currently his 2020 Top Series 1 PSA 10 rookies are going for around $55. And if you can find PSA or Top Series 1 in stores, buy it up. That stuff is going quick. It's got a pretty good set of rookies in Yordan Alvarez and Gavin Lux and Bo Bichette and Aristides Aquino. Significantly better than Kyle Lewis, to name a couple, another one, significantly better than 2020 Top Series 2. Again, I'm not trying to rag on Top Series 2 a bunch. I brought it up before, and I'll bring it up again, but I am trying to save you guys money by telling you, hey, don't go buy it. Take that money and go buy Luis Robear cards instead of buying into boxes, or buy into breaks for the White Sox instead of buying into boxes, because the checklist is just terrible outside of Luis Robear. Or instead, go buy Top Series 1 and aim for Gavin Lux, Jordan Alvarez, Bo Bichette, Kyle Lewis, Aristides Aquino, the list goes on. Because it is significantly better. AJ Puck, Jesus Luzardo, I think. Actually, Luzardo probably came out in update. But anyways, significantly better than Series 2. So look for that. Gavin Lux, NL Rookie of the Year award winner. That's my guess. And speaking of Luis Robear, I'm picking someone else to win the Rookie of the Year. I don't know who it's going to be. I'm taking the field here. Luis Robear Top Series 2 rookies are going ungraded, $16 to $18. No graded cards have been sold. This product just came out. PSA is so slow they wouldn't get that back anyways this time. But I'm going to take the field. I just feel like there's so much expectations on Luis Robear that I don't know if he hits it. He might. He's probably going to be really good. But I'm more comfortable taking the field here. I'm sure there's going to be that random rookie that really just takes off and surprises that you're not expecting. I don't know if it'll be like a Joe Adell or somebody like that, because Joe Adell's obviously not going to be unexpected. But I think it might be somebody that's just like one of those rookies that you're not even thinking about. All of a sudden he accidentally hits like 310 with 15 home runs over the first 60, or not 15, 310 with 9 home runs and 370 on base or something, at 860 OPS, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, somebody like Tommy Edman, who was really good last year but came out of nowhere for the Cardinals. Well, if a guy like that does that in 60 games and Luis Robear is not amazing, he'll probably win the Rookie of the Year. So I'm taking the field over Luis Robear here. But if you're looking into buying some of his cards, again, Top Series 2 that just came out, $16 to $18 for a Luis, and I keep saying Robear. I'm sorry. Luis Robert. I know it's spelled Robert. It's pronounced Robert. But when I first heard his name years ago, they kept saying Robear, and it's just stuck in my mind. So Luis Robert, that's the guy you're looking for. Somebody's probably going to rip into me on the comments saying it's pronounced Robert if they didn't listen this far into the podcast. All right, so those are my AL and NL Rookie of the Years. I'm going to go on. We'll save MVP for last. We're going to go on to home run leader and average leader. So home run leader, I guess I'm just kind of in love with the Reds at this point, and I'm picking Nick Castellanos to lead the league in home runs. He was really good for the Cubs last year. Now he gets to be a DH, not have to focus on defense. And he can play 60 games, 30 of which are in Great American Ballpark, 5 of which will be in Miller Park, 5 of which will be in Wrigley. 40 of those games are going to be in tiny parks. Tiny parks. Which is a huge, huge blessing for him to try to lead the league in home runs. I would not be shocked if he does it. Or another Red, Aristides Aquino, maybe he leads the league in home runs. But it's going to be somebody that plays in tiny parks. It's not going to be like an AL West player, I don't think. So we'll see what happens there. But Nick Castellanos is my pick to lead the league in home runs. As for how many home runs he hits, I'm going to guess he leads the league with 22. 22 home runs in 60 games. And then if you're looking into buying for him, his 2014 Topps PSA 10 rookie goes for around $25. There might be a decent option at a buy. People don't really love DHs. So, you look at JD Martinez, he's a really, really stinking good hitter, but his prices aren't that high. So Nick Castellanos probably following suit there and being a DH, but $25, there may be some room to grow, especially if he blows up and the Reds blow up this year. So keep that in mind. And then for average, I didn't want to pick like one of the typical guys you might expect, the Cody Bellingers, the Christian Yelich's of the world. So instead, I was bandying about a couple ideas. One was going to be Jeff McNeil, but instead I'm going with Luis Arias of the Twins. I expect him to lead the league in average. His 2019 Topps Update PSA 10 is going for $55, which is way more than I expected it to be. Did not expect the price to be that high. That's a really, really good deal. If you have him and are selling him, I don't know if I'd buy him at $55. I just don't trust it that much. But I've got him leading the league. He's an all-fields hitter that is a line drive approach, not trying to hit home runs. Should do pretty well in the early going, when most of the other hitters are struggling to catch up to the pitchers to be him. And then also, he gets to play in a lot of big fields in the AL Central. The Royals, big field, Tigers, big field, White Sox, pretty big, Twins is big, which would help his approach. So I expect Luis Urias and his $55 PSA 10s to lead the league in average this year. And then moving on to my MVP picks, this is a little bit of a cop-out, but I'm going with my heart here. NL MVP, I'm picking Christian Yelich. He had 25 home runs and hit .313 with a .425 on base and a .719 slugging, which was good for 1,144 OPS through 60 games last year. And I want more of the same. I'm expecting more of the same. So hopefully that goes well there. And then on the AL side, we've got Anthony Rendon. I expect him to win the MVP this year. He's been one of the top position players in Major League Baseball the last couple of years. One of the top third basemen when he was on the Nationals in his 5 healthy seasons, so not his rookie season, not his third season, but in his 5 healthy seasons, he's averaged 5.64 Baseball Reference WAR with a 6.4 Baseball Reference WAR last year. And for Fangraphs WAR, he's averaging 6.12 Fangraphs WAR and had 7 Fangraphs WAR last year. So he's extremely good. Now he gets to go play with Mike Trout and learn from Mike Trout, and I expect that to just be a little bit of an upgrade there. So I'm going with Anthony Rendon. If you're looking to buy into him, 2013 Topps Update PSA 10s are selling for anywhere between $55 and $80. $55 was the last auction. $80 they've been being popped for buy it nows. So Anthony Rendon, Christian Yelich, my AL and NL MVPs respectively. Now let's get into a little bit of problems I've noticed with the 60-game season. This is how we're going to end the podcast here. Just a couple of things that I've noticed while going through it. And number one, there's no minor league season. That's a problem for Bowman Chrome collectors like me, a lot of other people, is that if you're into Bowman Chrome, well, there's no minor league season, then don't buy now because you're not going to be selling anytime soon. Prices aren't going to go up with games being played. So no minor league season stinks, and it especially stinks for the minor leaguers because unless they have spring training or extended spring training or instructionals to report to, they're not going to get an entire year of playing in, which will be a really big problem for teams that rely on having a good minor league system for people to get excited. Royals, nobody's excited about the Royals MLB team, but they're excited about the minor league system. And if those guys aren't playing, that's a really big blow to both the players and the organization. A couple other things about 60-game season is that it'll be interesting to see what teams call up their prospects and what teams don't. So I'm envisioning a scenario where a team does not want to call up a prospect, take the Angels and Joe Adell, where they don't want to call up a prospect to waste a 60 games. If you use one of his years of service time on 60 games and all of a sudden you only have 5 after that, that's kind of a waste. So I'm expecting some teams that are budget conscious maybe to not call up players they normally would have. We'll see there. But then on the flip side of that, I can see situations where a team like, say the Tigers get off to a really hot start unexpectedly, and all of a sudden it's only a 60-game sprint to the finish line, and they're like, oh, we should call up Casey Mize, he's our best pitcher, or Matt Manning, when they normally wouldn't have, but now they are because they're in a situation to succeed that it was not expected. So I can see it going both ways, where one team is like, no, I don't want to waste a year of service time on 60 games, and another team is saying, yeah, I'm going to call up Casey Mize because we're in a much better situation than we thought we'd be in. Let's go after it and win and try to make the playoffs when we weren't expected to. Especially when 60 games is a lot easier to make the playoffs than 162. Any team can get hot for 60 games no matter how bad you are. That's the nice thing about baseball, is that every year you start, there's hope. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you're the Mariners and the Tigers or if you're the Dodgers and the Yankees. There's always hope there. On that front, that maybe this is the year that you explode. And a 60-game season really offers a ton of hope for a lot of bad teams. And then a couple other things is players on the bubble, it's unfortunate that they feel like they probably have to play. Brock Holt just said this yesterday. He said he felt like he had to play or else his playing career would be done because he had no guaranteed contract next year. And if he sits out, he might just be forgotten about. And so you got players who are probably may not want to play, but feel like they have to play because of being on a roster bubble, so to speak. And if you don't play this year, you're kind of just saying, all right, my career is over. And there's a lot of guys that don't want to do that, especially somebody who's Brock Holt's age of like 32. On the other flip side, that we've had a number of guys, Tyson Ross, Joe Ross, Ryan Zimmerman, a number of other guys that are sitting out. Especially interesting in Ryan Zimmerman's case is that he is 36, going to be 37, so sitting out now, his career really might be over. We just don't know. On the flip side of that, you will have, just kidding. On top of that, pitchers, so hitters that don't want to sit out because their careers might be over if they do. On top of that, you got pitchers that are always ahead of hitters at the early part of the season, and now you're going to be running into a situation where it's only a 60-game season, so you get guys that are on their last legs as hitters that don't get it going right away in a 60-game season where they could have in a 162-game season, and now their full season stats look really bad and they don't get re-signed, and then it's just game over for them. And on the flip side of that, though, you have pitchers who might be on their last legs who look really, really good in a 60-game sample, and all of a sudden get a contract for next year. So a number of different little things that could be going into a 60-game season, which makes it the stakes that much higher. Not to mention, obviously, that COVID-19 and everything that's happening there makes the stakes really, really high, and that what happens if somebody gets it and is symptomatic and has really bad symptoms, was it worth playing baseball and getting them sick for that reason? Probably not. So should the season happen? Probably not. Will there be problems with the season, especially because right now testing's being weird and teams haven't got their tests back? And I was reading about one guy who failed the test and then got tested again, failed it again, and then tested or had two positive tests, took a third test, it came back negative, took a fourth test the next day, it came back positive again. So there's weird situations there where the testing's bad and the testing's not getting done. So the likelihood of this season actually finishing, I'm not giving it 100%. I don't know if it will actually finish. I think it may start, but it may just all go to the toilet pretty quickly. So while I'm excited to see baseball again, do not expect this baseball season to be anything like you expected. But be excited to buy baseball cards again. I hope you're all excited. It's not Bowman Chrome, but Topps rookie cards. We went through some prices. Obviously, there's a number of guys in here. Christian Yelich, Topps update, PSA 10s, selling for $190. Anthony Rendon, PSA 10s from 2013, selling for $55 to $80. Both of those are from 2013, actually. And you got the lesser guys. The Luis Arias is selling for PSA 10, selling for $55 and that stuff. So get excited for the baseball season. Don't expect it to finish. I'm not trying to be negative, but just trying to gear you guys up for all the possibilities out there. So I hope you all enjoyed this baseball season preview. Hope you enjoyed my predictions. If you have your own predictions, put them in the YouTube comments below. Would love to see them. Would love to go through them, maybe have a little back and forth. Or go onto the Instagram and comment your predictions in the little Instagram post that will be up for this video. Comment your predictions there, and let's just have some fun with it. So thank you all for listening to this Dinging Corners baseball preview, 2020 baseball season preview. I enjoy covering baseball for you guys, and I hope you enjoy listening. And I will talk to you again next time.